Hi, I'm James Naylor Green, professor of Brazilian history and culture at Brown University and the national co-coordinator of the U.S. Network for Democracy in Brazil. This program is supported by the Washington, Brazil office. This is Brazil Unfiltered. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Rafael Grohmann, who is an assistant professor of media studies with a focus on critical platform studies at the University of Toronto. He's the leader of the DigiLabour Initiative, co-director of Critical Digital Methods Institute, and a researcher of the Fairwork and Platform Work Inclusion Living Lab project, as well as a founding board member of Labor Tech Research Network. His research interests include platform cooperativism and worker-owned platforms, work in artificial intelligence, workers' organizations, platform labor, communications, media, and work. And his research has appeared in academic outlets such as New Media and Society and the International Journal of Communication, and media outlets such as BBC UK, Wired, The Verge, and VICE. He is currently working on a book manuscript on worker-owned platforms in Latin America. Welcome to Brazil Unfiltered, Rafael. I'm so glad you could be with us today.
Hello, thank you so much, James, for having me. I'm totally yours.
Great. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about how you got involved in researching work and labor in the digital age? What drew you into this field?
Yeah, I'm a sociologist by training, and I did my MA and PhD in communication and media in Brazil, and started my academic career researching media workers, especially journalists and like freelance journalists, and how journalists create another kinds of organization like self-management or collectives or cooperatives. And after 2016, I think, I started to change my academic career to understand the broader context of digital technologies and labor. And in the past, like 5 years, we started to see some kind of Uberization with the emergence of digital platforms and all this platformization of labor, which means the increased dependence on digital platforms to work in many areas of our lives. So I created DigiLabour website and DigiLabour newsletter too. And so we started this kind of research as a sociologist and media scholar.
So you're working on an initiative called Fairwork, which focuses on labor conditions in the digital realm. Could you explain to our listeners a little bit about what Fairwork does?
Yeah, Fairwork is an action research project, which means we would like to understand and also intervene in the platform economy around the world. Fairwork is a project led by University of Oxford in the UK and WZB Social Center in Berlin, and we run this project in 40 countries around the world, and we evaluate digital labor platforms against decent work principles, which means we interview workers, we meet with platform managers, and we conduct desk research with the main digital labor platforms around the world against principles such as fair pay regarding minimum wage and local living wage, regarding working conditions, regarding health and safety and training and mental health too, contracts, which means like all the legal perspectives around platform workers, management regarding rules around deactivations and transparency and anti-discrimination policies, and at least the five principle is representation, which means the voice of worker, the collective worker voice, and the freedom of association. So we score the platforms against these principles, which means 0 until 10, and around these 40 countries, pressuring platforms to improve their policies too.
So you have companies like Uber and Amazon. The internet has really ushered in a new age of precarious labor relations. So how has this played out in a country like Brazil so far?
Yeah, first of all, I don't like the term gig economy to explain Brazil because, and actually, I don't like this term to explain the majority world or the global South.
Why is
Why?
that?
Yeah, for me, a gig economy is not exactly new in these countries because gig is the norm or the rule of the for the working class in these countries historically in terms of informality or informal work so for me gig economy as a novelty is a more an European and like for London or even like Berlin countries that live it a welfare state and after 2008 crisis started to see oh people living by gigs and so this is not a novelty for us maybe the novelty here is not the precarization but the platformization so digital companies that on digital platforms that started to see countries like Brazil with a high precarious labor market, with a higher informal market. And this is the perfect storm to digital platforms land here and other countries of global south. So we talk more about precarious labor than precarization because maybe this is this is the thing that occurs more in global north countries countries in terms to increase precarity or change in relation to employment status and so on but here in Brazil uh, is going deeper in terms to this informality and this precarious labor subordinated and controlled by these digital platforms.
So let's get a sense of dimensions. Like how many people work for apps such as Uber, iFoods, and Amazon in Brazil? What's the extent of this sector of the economy?
Yeah, first of all, I would like to say that it's so hard to find data from these platforms because it's like a black box. The companies owns data from like how many workers and so on. It's so difficult around the world to governments or policymakers to get this data. The approximate data around delivery workers and drivers in Brazil is 1.5 million drivers and delivery workers by digital platforms, but we don't know exactly. Maybe we have more than 1.5 million. And actually, as platformization affects all sectors of work regarding like care work or education, we have many more of these people here. And maybe Brazil is one, even because of the workers organizing in the last few years. And maybe Brazil has one of the central or key roles in the platform economy around the world.
In terms of being a model for organizing and possibly attaining certain workers' rights?
Not no, but as a good example regarding how platform companies act here. One example I could offer is that Uber Files, The Guardian last year launched incredible report or news story called Uber Files regarding the lobby and how Uber manage policymakers and governments in Europe and United States. But actually, in Brazil, we have worst lobbies and public relations from companies. One of the main company here is iFood,
Mm-hmm.
a local platforms now owned by a Dutch company that is controlled by a South African fund And iFood was accused by an awarded news story in Brazil by journalist Clarissa Levy from Agência Pública. iFood was accused to hire a PR agency to create fake accounts of workers to undermine the workers organizing. And there's a video in which one of the CEOs of this PR agency said, we will kill the main organizer of workers. So the type of lobbies or companies monitoring and surveilling critical researchers or hiring people from governments and this kind of thing makes Brazil a country that the world needs to. It's not only Uber files in the US or the UK, because here we have most powerful platforms acting here in the local politics too.
Yeah, I am in Brazil currently, and I use Uber a lot, and I am absolutely shocked at the amount of money that the Uber driver takes home a day. I talk to them a lot about that. It's really exploitative to the nth degree. It's really bad. So we know maybe a little bit more about the large tech firms that are doing these kinds of things. What about smaller enterprises such as click farms? What kind of jobs do they do? What kind of jobs and companies are out there that we maybe don't pay as much attention to?
Great. Today, June 19, a Brazilian researcher called Matheus Viana Braz launched a new report about Brazilian workers who train artificial intelligence. In Brazil, there's about 50 platforms whose workers train data for artificial intelligence, from global platforms like Amazon Mechanical Turk or Appen or Lionbridge to local click farm platforms. And it's interesting to talk about click farming because click farm is a phenomenon from the global peripheries, from like Indonesia and Philippines and so on. But when we were talking about click farm, we imagine like call centers or something. And in Brazil, actually, they act as digital labor platforms, as a website. So what are click farm platforms? They are local companies owned by like CEOs from a small city or medium city in Brazil that promise real followers on Instagram and TikTok to their clients. Who are the clients? Politicians, celebrities, famous people like TV showmen or soccer players, or in the core of the clients are at the core of the clients there are small influencers and content creators from fashion or from health sectors that pay for this click farm to get real followers. But who are these real followers? They are workers earning by 0.005 reais. So it's less than 1 cent of reais to follow and click on for these clients. So as workers receive less than 1 cent, they need to create fake accounts to boost their earnings. And so there are parallel markets with many fake accounts and workers earning or acting with 300 of fake accounts. And they created bots also to boost their fake accounts. And Instagram and TikTok and other social media platforms could not stop this kind of fake markets. Two comments about it. One is it's not a choice for these workers to choose like these unethical or immoral jobs, because they are managing their survival in the job market. and I have interviewed like a woman that used to work as a waste picker in Brazil, and she said with the pandemic, the worst got worse in terms to being a waste picker, and so I decided to work for these websites, and I have a small child and so on, and how this kind of remote labor through platforms increase the gender divisions of labor and so on. My second comment is how these click farms reproduce and radicalize the informality of work in Brazil. We discovered that many workers turned into resellers of fake accounts. So they not only work for click farms in terms to boosting these influencers accounts or politicians accounts, but as they receive less and less, and they want to create fake accounts that don't appears as fake accounts, there a parallel market and each worker turned into a reseller of fake accounts. So this is historical in Brazil. My father and my mother used to work as reseller of products in Brazil, like from Paraguay to Brazil and so on in the 80s or the 90s. So the activity of reseller of like beauty products or in the free markets in Brazil are so historical. So the click farm I improve the click farms radicalize and update this kind of informality of work. And my third comments for click farms is that many people see these workers as scammers. Okay, they are scamming social media platforms. But for me, and I wrote an article called Platform Scams, they are more reacting to the scams, or they are these local companies in Brazil, they are leading these workers to scam social media platforms. They're not exactly, they are part of this perverse circuit of platform labor in Brazil. That's the kind of human bots acting for parasite platforms.
Incredible. It's really amazing. I'm learning so much today. So Fairwork in 2022 issued a report saying that Brazil was only better than Bangladesh in terms of labor conditions for platform workers. Could you elaborate on this result? What was being measured? How can we understand this?
Yeah, as I said earlier, in Fairwork, we evaluate the digital labor platforms against decent work principles. And last year, we launched the first Fairwork Brazil report, evaluating iFood and Uber and so on. And so the main platforms only achieve maximum 2 from 10 principles. So iFood 2, 99, 2, Uber 1, Uber Eats 0, Get Ninja 0, Happy 0. And this is worse than South Africa or India or so on. And actually, we are discovering that Latin America is the worst region in the world around decent work in platform economy, because Argentina, we are in Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay, and Colombia, Chile, Ecuador. And in many of these workers, the most platforms only awarded 0 or 1, the most of the platforms. Now in Ecuador, in the third report, one platform awarded 8, but it's a platform co-op from care work sector. It's not exactly a big tech company and so on. So Latin America has worse index than Africa or Asia and in the platform economy. And now we are preparing our second report for Fairwork, evaluating now in this round 10 digital labor platforms, and we will launch in the end of July to see if platforms are better this year than last year. And now we will evaluate also, we also evaluate local platforms and also care work platform. Let's see what will happen in the end of July with the digital labor platforms in Brazil.
Wow. So in 2017, the Brazilian Congress approved a labor reform, which made really important changes to previous protections and restrictions. So how has that reform benefited tech companies that hire platform workers?
This was the perfect storm. It's interesting how this labor reform naturalize or legitimize many things that occur in the Brazilian labor market. As I said earlier, I started my academic career researching the labor of journalists in Brazil, especially freelance journalists.
Mm-hmm.
And there were many news agencies or media outlets that hired journalists as freelancers, but not exactly they were freelancers, because they had all the rights of a freelancer without rights, and all the rules regarding being an employee. In Brazil, they called in the past, it's called like a full freelancer, or in Portuguese, freelancer fixo. And so this is the kind I really understand the labor of media workers and journalists in Brazil as a laboratory for the whole labor market, because now after the labor reform, all the situations regarding not hiring as an employee is the norm or the rule for the labor market in many sectors, including creative sectors as media and communications. And so this is the perfect storm to platformization, because platformization is not only the technology or the technological thing, but also how these platforms act, and acting together with a strong data extraction, emergence of a strong financialization of our everyday life, and also all this entrepreneurial discourse around our workers. So the labor reform was the perfect storm to this emergence of platformization too.
So Brazil has made some attempts to organize platform workers. However, these initiatives have met with really fierce resistance from the tech companies, as I understand it. Could you give us a picture of how platform worker organization has fared so far in Brazil, and what are its perspectives or prospects?
Yeah, one thing that with the pandemic we learned is that platform workers are not unorganizable, but they have like fissures, or they create forms of organizing. In 2020, in July 2020, the labor workers started like as one of the strongest workers mobilization, worker protests in Brazil in the last decade. But what we are seeing, not only in Brazil but in many countries, is the labor workers is likely to mobilize, but it's hard to organize. So in the order more of mobilization in terms of protests or strikes or campaigns, but it's difficult to transform this organizing or this worker energy into worker organizing in terms to associations or unions, or more formal and stable kind of organization. So in this past 3 years, the delivery workers or platform workers in Brazil are learning to create these associations, and there's some kind of dispute and struggle between the traditional trade unions and the emerging associations or other forms of worker solidarity. And now in this in the amidst of platform labor regulation in the country, we are seeing this kind of disputes too.
So, and what are the tensions that are between traditional unions and the platform workers? What are what are the disputes? How are they manifested?
Yeah, the traditional trade unions wake up late to this platform worker organizing, and on the other hand, the emerging associations don't like the tradition unions because all of the ideologies from like Thatcherism from now until now in terms to okay, we don't like unions. Unions is don't like is not for us. We like we would like to create our own perspective with autonomy without unions. One of the examples from Brazilian Twitch streamers, is that in 2021 they started a protest called Twitch Union, but in Brazil, union is not worker union, but in this kind of I don't know how to say that in English, explaining the Portuguese name, because union is not about worker union, but about reunited in many ways.
Right.
And so the workers, the Twitch streamers struggle to change the name from union because no, we don't like union. Let's reframe this name and not union because we don't like this name.
What was the word what was the word they chose?
Apagão.
Apagação.
Apagão. I don't know how to say that. Yeah. It's like turn off the lights.
Yeah, it's like a big blackout or a brownout when things go black. So that's kind of strange as a name. What's the reason they're using that name?
Yeah, because they would like to turn off all the lights of Twitch in that day.
I see. So it's basically expressing a tactic, a labor tactic, like a strike, a kind of way in which they're going to have some effect on the bosses, the people who own the companies that they're working for. I see. Okay.
Exactly. So there's some kind of dispute of narratives around the word union here, and the worker organizing with unions or this kind of unionization. So this is not only in Brazil. In many countries, this are occurring the same or similar. But in Brazil now, we are seeing this kind of dispute even in the news coverage.
Can we look at any victories, or have there been any success stories? Anything positive to report?
Maybe we can report some kind of new, the emergence of new leaders of workers here in Brazil, or some kind from like social media accounts, from the delivery workers strikes. We are seeing this complex and sometimes contradictory emergence of new leaders here, but not exactly victories, because companies learned how to lead with the strikes, offering, okay, free delivery for all, or we will offer more money for workers that will not adopt the strikes today, and this kind of thing, or of demobilization from a company side. So it's difficult to say we have a victory here.
I was talking to an Uber driver several weeks ago in São Paulo, 2 weeks ago in São Paulo, who has participated in a one-day work stoppage where people didn't work, and he did it. He was very conservative about politics. He supported Bolsonaro, but he thought that was important because he understood he was being really exploited by Uber. And yet he said many of his colleagues, people who were working, made a joke of it and teased him. You're wasting your time, your day. And he admitted that he lost 300 reais that day in not working, but he felt it was important to do that. So I see there's a tension there between those workers who have bought into the Thatcheristic neoliberal entrepreneurship. We're all mini entrepreneurs, and making it much harder to organize.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Two short stories for you. One, a great British colleague called Callum Kent wrote a book called Writing for Deliveroo, an ethnography of delivery workers in Brighton in the UK. And they quote Brazil 7 times in the book. And they say the first stoppage in Brighton started from the WhatsApp of Brazilian workers. And the second time he said the Brazilian workers had the best tactics for worker organizing, better than the UK people here. But in the seventh time he quote Brazil, he learned that these workers are Bolsonaro supporters. And I say to Callum Kent, yeah, Brazil is not so easy to understand in this kind of complexities or contradictions. And the second short story is that I told you about click farm workers. And in 2021, and I have to add that they discovered this click farm because of YouTuber that act as neoliberal coaches saying, okay, I will sell this course for you, or I will teach how to earn his money on social media. But the click farm workers in 2021 started a stoppage, a strike against a click farm in Brazil. And who was the person that started the strike? Exactly the YouTuber coach that published a video saying we need, because the one of the click farm changed the earnings from 0.001 to 0.006. And so the YouTuber published a video saying we have to stop. And we need to pressure the platform about these earnings. And all the comments of click farm workers was, whoa, now I found a YouTube channel for working class people, and so on. It isn't. These two examples show us how the neoliberal ideology and all the entrepreneurial discourse are so mixed with the desire for worker organizing, despite the fact that this cannot be exactly stable. It's not. It's more like lights or highlights in some moments.
And actually, one of my own personal experiences, again, with talking to Uber drivers, I've used that as a kind of a tool for doing an anthropological, sociological study of what's going on in Brazil, is that Uber drivers spend the day in their cars listening to the radio. In São Paulo, they listened to Jovem Pan, which was extremely conservative and repeated constantly the same discourse that the far right-wing news media outlets were selling. And it was pretty striking. So you really have another problem here of people with a very conservative ideology working in the platform economy, and therefore making it complicated to try to organize. I'm very curious to know, based on your book manuscript on worker-owned platforms in Latin America, what are these platforms? How do they operate? Can you give us an overview?
Yeah, before that, I would like to mention that my great colleague, Rosana Pinheiro Machado from Dublin, is a Brazilian based in Dublin, started research on the connections of platform workers or precarious workers and the far right in Brazil, India, and Philippines. So soon we'll have some results to share, and Rosana is a great researcher on that. So about worker-owned platforms, we are talking about platform cooperativism, or some kind of how to connect from a Latin American perspective, solidarity economy, and from workers' perspective, and also how to workers reframe technology and create their own technologies. We are starting to see in a no organized way some delivery workers organizing and creating their own technologies in Brazil, in Argentina, in Colombia, in Ecuador. And in Brazil, for instance, there are Senoritas Courier, there is a Courier Co-op from trans women, from cis women and trans people that are starting to create its own platform. And the homeless worker movement in Brazil has a technology sector fighting for digital sovereignty from workers' perspective and creating apps and tools for working class. In Argentina, there's a strong federation of technology co-ops. And in Ecuador and Colombia, there are care work platforms from worker ownership. This means mixing the democratic governance with design justice to struggle against algorithm racism or unfair AI or something. This means struggling for data commons instead of data colonialism or data extractivism for worker side, and start to create new circuits or local circuits of production and consumption with local development and so on. Latin America has a rich history around community economy or solidarity economy, from Brazil to Argentina with worker recovered factories. And Latin America has also strong history on community technologies, from cyber scene, socialist cybernetics in Chile, to hacker movements in many countries in Latin America. Cuban algorithms in 80s. And in Brazil, actually, in the first Lula government with Gilberto Gil culture ministry, there was the emergence of commons and free technologies in the culture sector. But we learned that the movements around solidarity economy and the movements around free technologies or open and community technology in Latin America didn't talk to each other before, even in the Lula government, within the Lula government. So there's a room to create public policies for platform cooperativism or for worker-owned platforms in Latin America. We are struggling to create that in Brazil, in terms to also universities accelerating or incubating this kind of worker co-ops, because the rationale is that we don't need to depend on big techs forever. And we need to create our own platform ecosystem from worker side and from community side in an experimental way to do that. So we are looking forward and trying to design and build policy making for deciding. My book manuscript is about this history and in this Latin American perspective on worker-owned platforms.
So there are certain people within the Congress, Brazilian Congress, that are talking about the possibility of regulation of platforms. And President Lula has voiced his support for some kind of regulation. How has this gone? What are the possibilities that some effective protection might be coming out of Congress?
I'm afraid that this platform labor regulation will not so great. The the Lula government started a new working group focused on labor regulation with representatives of workers, of government, and of companies. But as I said earlier, the platform companies in Brazil is doing a strong campaign in even hiring researchers and so on to show their own opinion on that. And the opinion of the platforms is that, okay, we can offer some rights, but not all rights, all worker rights, but more about assurance. So the platform focused on is more assurance and how they can offer assurance to all workers, like regarding health or so on. But this is dangerous in some ways because you create a third category of workers, like workers with like it's not a standard worker, it's not autonomous, but a worker with less rights. And this is dangerous because it's not only for delivery workers and delivery drivers or drivers in some way or ride-hailing drivers. We know that platformization affects many areas of our lives. So the dangerous is in the future, we have all the workers in this category of workers with less rights instead of standard workers or so on. So I'm not I'm a little bit conservative about the success of this platform labor regulation in terms to guarantee some kind of protagonism um, regarding workers' rights in Brazil, because if the platform side will be the winner of this working group, we have the legitimization of this perspective in a government from Workers' Party. And so this will be so difficult to change after that. Mm-hmm. So this is another reason I'm more happy with the platform cooperativism or worker-owned platforms public policy, because beyond this platform regulation, we need to create public policies for worker-owned platforms and public platforms too.
So finally, one last question. Our time is running out, but Fairwork has highlighted the impact of artificial intelligence in the workplace. Could you give us more details on this issue with examples of how AI can affect platform workers?
Yeah, AI is neither artificial nor intelligence, because AI depends on many human labor. It's not my quote, it's Kate Crawford from the Atlas of AI book. So artificial intelligence is an umbrella term to name some things like machine learning or deep learning or generative forms of this machine learning and deep learning. And so the algorithm management can be one of the manifestations of this AI in the platform workers' everyday life. But actually, AI is increasingly in our everyday life, from ChatGPT to some kind of surveillance platforms monitoring workers and bosses using AI. What Fairwork is, and also all these micro workers, which means the data annotators for artificial intelligence. As I said earlier, in Brazil, there are about 50 data annotation platform from Amazon Mechanical Turk to Appen. There are people who train data for artificial intelligence, receiving like 0.1 cents of dollar for these tasks. And what Fairwork is starting to do is creating fair work principles for use of artificial intelligence in the workplace, in terms to create a future-proof or jobs, or to strengthen explainability and transparency and the rules the companies use to create AI. I think what Fair Work has at this moment is more a manifesto in terms to what we want to see in the workplace in terms to fairness AI, or truly fairness AI, and not this fair washing of ethical AI that Google and other companies are creating in the past few years.
Rafael, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Brazil Unfiltered. It was really fabulous to have your ideas, share your information and your research with us. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye-bye.
Great. So I hope you enjoyed the interview. If you are watching, you're on YouTube, don't forget to like the video. And if you have not yet subscribed, please do so. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast, please give us a 5-star review. It helps other people find the program. Have a great week. Until next time, até a próxima.